My name is Lee Willis, and I thought nothing could break the bond between a father and his son. I was wrong. After giving my son $20,000 to take the whole family on a dream vacation to Hawaii, I stood in an airport terminal with my suitcase in hand, only to hear the words that cut deeper than any knife: "I forgot to buy you a ticket, Dad. Just go home." In that moment, I realized I wasn't family in his eyes. I was just a wallet he no longer needed. But what he didn't expect was that his betrayal would spark something in me he had never seen before. Before we begin this story, tell me, where are you watching from and how old are you? Please subscribe to Family Betrayal Unmasked to hear more powerful stories like this one. I still remember the weight of that suitcase in my hand, heavy not just with clothes, but with hope. I had been planning this family trip for months, poring over brochures, picturing the grandchildren splashing in the surf, imagining dinners where 3 generations would laugh together under Hawaiian sunsets. I gave Simon $20,000, money I had worked for all my life. Not as a loan, not as an obligation, but as a gift to make memories while I still had the strength to travel. I wanted them to remember me not as a man fading into old age, but as the father and grandfather who made their dreams possible. The terminal at San Francisco International was alive that morning. Families rolled oversized bags toward the counters, little ones bouncing with excitement, floral shirts peeking from half-zipped luggage. I walked beside Simon, my chest full of anticipation. Then his voice sliced through the noise, flat and cold. "Dad, I have some bad news." Bad news. At first I thought maybe a delay, a gate change, something minor. But the look in his eyes told me otherwise. He wouldn't meet my gaze, staring instead at the departure board, as if the letters there could shield him from the truth he was about to drop. "I forgot to buy you a ticket. You should just go home." The words didn't make sense. My feet stopped moving, the suitcase jerking against my leg. "What do you mean, forgot?" I asked, my voice trembling more than I wanted. "We've been planning this for 3 months." He shifted hands, buried deep in his pockets, his face an unreadable mask. There was just so much to coordinate. Things got crazy with work. But I knew better. "You don't forget to buy a ticket for the man who funded the trip. You don't forget the father who made the entire vacation possible." I pressed forward, dragging my suitcase toward the Hawaiian Airlines counter. "Excuse me," I said to the woman in a crisp blue uniform. "Can you check under the name Lee Willis?" Her fingers moved across the keyboard, her professional smile faltering as she searched. "I'm sorry, sir. I don't see any reservation for you." She looked again, then shook her head. "I do have Simon Willis, party of 4. But no Lee Willis." My chest tightened. "Check again," I insisted, though deep down I already knew the truth. Behind me, Simon stood several feet away, pretending to check his watch, avoiding the scene he had orchestrated. Other travelers glanced at me as I steadied my luggage. I could feel their pity pressing in on me, like I was some old fool who didn't understand how the world worked anymore. The humiliation burned hotter than the California sun pouring through the terminal windows. That was the moment it hit me: this wasn't a mistake. This had been planned. Simon wanted me to walk away quietly, to accept my role as disposable. But as I stood there, my heart breaking and my dignity slipping, something inside me hardened. He thought I'd just go home. He thought I'd stay silent. He was about to learn how wrong he was. The longer I stood in that terminal, the clearer it became. This wasn't about forgetfulness. This was about removal. Simon had engineered this moment weeks ago, and I had walked right into it, carrying both my suitcase and my trust. The agent tried again, her fingers dancing across the keyboard as she searched through multiple systems. "I can see the Willis reservation," she said carefully. "Party of 4. Booked 6 weeks ago." 6 weeks ago. I froze. We had been talking about this trip for 3 months, sitting around Fern's dining room table, passing hotel brochures and activity lists back and forth like children at Christmas. Yet 6 weeks ago, Simon had already sealed my absence into the itinerary. He hadn't just forgotten. He had erased me. I turned to look at him. He wasn't frantic. He wasn't ashamed. He was relieved, as if a weight had finally lifted from his shoulders. My heart dropped in a way it hadn't since the day Martha passed. "Dad, let's not make a scene," he said quietly, tugging at my arm. "This isn't going to work. Just go home. We'll call you from the hotel." I yanked my arm free. "Go home." My voice cracked the sound carrying across the rows of check-in counters. "I paid for this trip. I paid for all of you." Heads turned. Mothers clutching children, businessmen in suits, even the TSA agents glanced over. Simon stiffened his smile, glued to his face the way people smile when they want to hide the rot beneath. "Please, Dad," he said through clenched teeth. "You're making this harder than it needs to be. Harder." He had already stolen the joy out of months of planning, taken $20,000 from me. And now he wanted me to quietly step aside like yesterday's trash. The gate monitor behind him flickered, the bold red letters flashing "Final Boarding Call." It might as well have read "Final Betrayal." I turned back to the agent, my hand steadying against the counter. "Check other flights," I said. "Any airline, any route. I'll pay whatever it costs." She bit her lip. "Sir, everything is booked solid. There's a convention in Honolulu this week. The only option is a red-eye with 2 stops arriving days later. $1,800. $1,800 to chase a family that didn't even want me there." My wallet itched in my pocket, but I stopped myself. Why should I throw more good money after bad trust? Simon stepped closer, lowering his voice, but not his disdain. "Dad, you need to let this go. We'll manage without you. It's better this way." It was the word "better" that broke me. Better for whom? For him, for Fern, for the in-laws who always thought I was a burden. My hand trembled against the counter, not from weakness, but from the sudden, searing clarity of betrayal. I stared at the family security line, where my grandchildren had disappeared minutes earlier, their tiny hands clutching boarding passes I had bought, their eyes shining with excitement for an adventure I'd never share. The humiliation was complete. But as I bent to lift my fallen suitcase, something shifted inside me. Betrayal cuts deep, but it also sharpens. They thought they had ended this story at the gate. They had no idea I was just beginning mine. I stood there in the middle of the terminal, my suitcase toppled on its side. The handle bent slightly from the way Simon had yanked me away from the counter. Around me, people moved quickly, eyes darting in my direction, before sliding away, not wanting to linger on the sight of an old man abandoned. I could feel their pity like a weight pressing on my chest. That, in its own way, hurt more than Simon's words. Pity wasn't what I wanted from strangers. Respect was what I had earned, yet my own son had stripped it from me. The intercom crackled above my head. Hawaiian Airlines Flight 447 to Honolulu is now closed for boarding. Families rushed through the gate, dragging carry-ons, kids clutching stuffed animals, couples laughing with excitement. It should have been us. It should have been me. Instead, I stood on the wrong side of the gate, watching the life I'd paid for disappear down a corridor I couldn't enter. I pulled my phone from my pocket, my hands trembling. A new message buzzed on the screen. "Sorry, Dad. We'll call from the hotel. Take care of yourself." That was it. No apology, no explanation. Just a dismissal like a form letter to a stranger. The anger that rose inside me wasn't the fiery kind that explodes. It was quieter, heavier, like molten steel cooling into something unbreakable. For decades, I had given Simon everything, paid his tuition, co-signed his loans, bailed him out when jobs fell through. I thought generosity would build loyalty. Instead, it had built entitlement. I lifted my suitcase and began walking toward the exit, each step slow but deliberate. I wasn't going to chase after them, not anymore. If I had forced myself onto another flight, if I had begged to join them, I would have proven their calculation right, that I was desperate enough to accept any kind of treatment just to be included. No, that ended here. Outside, the automatic doors slid open, and the cool Bay Area air hit me like a jolt of truth. Simon thought this was over. He thought I'd sulk at home while they enjoyed beaches and luau's on my dime. But betrayal has a way of clearing the fog from a man's mind. And my mind was clearer than it had been in years. As I waited in the taxi line, I replayed every conversation leading up to this trip. Fern suggesting I might prefer a quiet hotel nearby. Pearl's casual comment that older folks liked different activities. Simon insisting he handle all the bookings. They hadn't just forgotten me, they had conditioned me to accept being left out, and I had nearly gone along with it. But as I climbed into the cab, giving the driver my address, I knew one thing for certain: I wasn't the helpless old man they thought I was. I was Lee Willis, 68 years old, an engineer who had spent his life solving impossible problems. They had written me out of their vacation. I was about to write them out of something far more permanent. When the taxi pulled into my driveway, the house looked exactly as I had left it a few hours earlier, quiet, orderly, waiting for me to return with stories from Hawaii. Instead, I walked through the door with nothing but humiliation clinging to my clothes. I set my suitcase down in the hallway and just stood there staring at the framed photographs lining the wall. Simon's graduation, his wedding, the grandkids playing in my yard. Each picture was a reminder of how much of myself I had poured into this family, only to be discarded at the airport like an afterthought. I moved toward my office, my steps heavy but steady. The oak desk Martha had insisted on buying still smelled faintly of polish. I slid open the filing drawer labeled Vacations and pulled out the folder marked Hawaii 2025. It was supposed to be a keepsake of joy, brochures, invoices, itineraries. Instead, it became evidence. I spread the papers across the desk, scanning the details. Hotel reservations for 7 guests, car rentals, activity bookings, and then I saw it. On the resort confirmation sheet, the names listed didn't include mine. They had even filled the extra slot with Martha's name, though she had been gone for 3 years. My breath caught in my throat. They hadn't just left me out, they had replaced me with a ghost. The truth struck like a hammer. Simon never intended for me to come. From the very beginning, the plan had been to use my money, my generosity, and then cut me out of the picture entirely. The airport humiliation hadn't been an accident. It had been the execution of a scheme that had been set in motion weeks ago. I sat back in my chair, staring at the evidence spread out before me. The weight of betrayal pressed down, but beneath it something stronger was rising. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking like a father desperate for approval. I was thinking like the man I had been in my prime, an engineer who saw problems clearly and solved them with precision. The phone on the corner of the desk buzzed with incoming calls. I glanced at the screen. Simon's number flashed again and again, the desperation growing with each ring. I let it go unanswered. Let him sweat in his tropical paradise, scrambling for a solution to a problem he had created with his own greed. I leaned forward and began to write in a notepad, documenting everything: dates, transfers, conversations, threats. Every betrayal leaves a paper trail, and I was going to use it. Simon thought he had silenced me at the airport. What he didn't understand was that silence isn't weakness, it's preparation. As the sun dipped behind the Oakland hills, I closed the folder and set it neatly back in the drawer. Tomorrow I would make my first move. Tonight I allowed myself a quiet smile. They wanted me erased, but I was still here. And I was about to prove that being underestimated was my greatest advantage. That night I didn't sleep much. I sat in my living room with the lights low, the tick of Martha's old clock keeping time while I stared at the ceiling. The humiliation still stung, but now it was mixed with something else, clarity. My son had drawn a line in the sand at that airport, and now I had a choice: step back quietly or step forward deliberately. I'd spent a lifetime being generous, believing kindness would hold a family together. But sometimes kindness left unchecked becomes an invitation to betrayal. At dawn, I poured myself a cup of coffee and carried it into my office. The folder was still on the desk. The evidence of my erasure spread like a crime scene. I studied it again with fresh eyes, each document no longer just a receipt, but a piece of testimony. The $20,000 transfer to Simon's account. The booking date 6 weeks ago, long after our first family meetings, but well before he ever told me about finalizing details. The hotel roster with Martha's name in place of mine. It wasn't negligence. It was design. My phone buzzed again, flashing with missed calls and messages. Simon's voice on the voicemails grew more impatient, more demanding. "Dad, call me back. We need to sort this out." The irony nearly made me laugh. He had no trouble leaving me stranded in San Francisco, but the second his plans wobbled, he expected me to steady the ground beneath him. That imbalance had ruled our relationship for too long. It ended now. I reached into my filing cabinet and pulled out more than just the vacation papers. I pulled out 20 years of bank statements, receipts, loan documents, all the proof of every time I had bailed him out. Tuition when he flunked out of college his first year. Mortgage payments during his unemployment. Medical bills for Fern's surgery. Gifts for the grandkids disguised as loans he never repaid. Line after line of sacrifices, each one an act of faith in him that had never been returned. It was sobering to see it in black and white. I had been his safety net, his silent partner, his invisible bank. And when the time came to honor that generosity, he chose betrayal over gratitude. That wasn't just selfish. It was predatory. I set the stack of papers aside and picked up the landline phone Martha had always insisted on keeping. Its weight felt solid in my hand, grounding me. I dialed a number I hadn't used in months, Bruce Harland, my lawyer. He was a man who understood leverage, legality, and legacy. If Simon wanted to treat me as expendable, then I would make sure he truly understood what expendable meant. By the time the sun broke fully over the Oakland hills, I had made up my mind. This wasn't about anger anymore. It was about justice. They thought they had erased me from a vacation. They had no idea I was preparing to erase them from something far more lasting. The morning after I gathered the evidence, I woke up with a strange calmness I hadn't felt in days. The humiliation at the airport had cracked something open inside me, but now there was focus. For once, I wasn't stumbling through my son's schemes. I was setting the pace. The first step would be simple, quiet, and devastating. I poured my coffee, sat at the oak desk, and stared at the resort confirmation again. 10 nights at the Grand Wa Ocean View Suites, activities lined up for the kids, all paid for with my $20,000. Simon probably imagined his family sipping cocktails by the pool while I sat at home licking my wounds. He wanted me forgotten. Instead, I was about to make myself unforgettable. I picked up the landline, not my cell phone. Something about the weight of that old receiver reminded me of Martha's firmness, the way she always believed real conversations should leave a mark. When the operator patched me through, a warm voice answered, "Aloha, this is Ko from Grand Wa Resort. How may I assist you today?" "Yes," I said evenly, "I need to cancel a reservation under the name Willis. 7 guests checking in tomorrow." There was a pause, the sound of rapid typing. "Mr. Willis, I see the reservation. Ocean View Suites for 10 nights. Are you sure? It's a very busy week here. Our resort is beautiful this time of year." "I'm sure." She hesitated. "Sir, I must inform you there's a cancellation fee of $3,200 given the short notice. Would you like me to discuss alternatives? Perhaps a partial stay? A change of dates?" "No," I cut in. "Cancel it completely. Every room." Another pause, then more typing. "Very well, the cancellation is processed. You'll receive an email confirmation shortly." Her voice softened. "May I ask why, sir? Perhaps there's something we can do." "You'll know soon enough," I said quietly. The line clicked off and the silence in my study deepened. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the phone. $3,200 less than I spent on property taxes in a quarter. A trivial fee compared to the look on Simon's face when he walked up to that check-in desk expecting luxury and found nothing. I imagined it vividly, Fern's polite smile, cracking Pearl chattering nervously, the children confused. Simon trying to mask panic with that same false calm he'd used on me in the terminal. Except this time there would be no way out, no quick fix. The very money he had stolen from me had become the blade of his own undoing. For the first time since the betrayal, I felt something close to satisfaction. Not joy, it wasn't joyful to think of my grandchildren stranded in a lobby, but justice sharp and precise. Actions had consequences. And I had just delivered the first. I closed the folder, my hand steady. This was only the beginning. Simon thought he had seen the last of me at that airport gate. What he didn't know was that I was just getting started. I didn't have to wait long for the fallout. The next afternoon, as I sat by the window with a cup of coffee in hand, my phone began buzzing across the table like a trapped insect. Call after call, all from a Hawaii number. I let them roll into voicemail. Curiosity eventually won, and I pressed play. "Dad, this isn't funny. The hotel says you canceled everything. We're standing here in the lobby with the kids and no rooms. Call me back right now." Simon's voice was sharp, strained. In the background, I could hear Fern snapping something about the credit cards and one of the children starting to cry. I leaned back in my chair, letting the sound wash over me. This was the moment. The precise sting I had been denied at the airport was now being returned to them tenfold, delivered in the very paradise they had tried to enjoy without me. The voicemails piled up. At midnight, Hawaii time, his voice cracked with panic. "Dad, please. We can't stay in the lobby all night. The kids don't understand what's happening. Fix this." But I didn't fix it. I sipped my coffee, looked at Martha's old photo on the mantel, and reminded myself why I couldn't. They hadn't just excluded me. They had calculated it. They had taken my money, replaced my name with hers, and expected me to smile, as if that was love. By morning, the desperation had shifted into anger. "You'll regret this, old man," Simon spat in one voicemail. "You can't punish your family like this." His voice was lower now, threatening. "When we get back to California, you'll see what happens." I wrote the words down carefully in my notepad, the same way Martha used to record important details when dealing with doctors or banks. Dates, times, tone. "You'll regret this. Old man." Words I knew would matter later. The image of them sleeping in the resort lobby, suitcases stacked around them, the children, restless Fern trying to bargain with front desk staff, kept flashing in my mind. A part of me felt a twinge of guilt. The grandchildren were innocent. But I reminded myself of that terminal of Simon pulling me away from the counter, his eyes filled with relief that I wasn't coming. Innocence had been forfeited the moment he chose betrayal over honesty. The difference was my action was a consequence. His had been premeditation. I closed my phone, silenced the buzzing, and stood at the window. The Oakland hills stretched out before me, the sun rising golden against their edges. Somewhere across the ocean, my son was learning that betrayal carries a cost. That cost was just beginning. For the first time in days, I slept soundly that night. While Simon scrambled in Hawaii, I had clarity in California. This wasn't cruelty. This was balance. He had stranded me at an airport. I had stranded him in paradise. And I wasn't done yet. By the third day, the panic in Simon's messages had taken on a rhythm of its own, like waves crashing against a shore. At first they were frantic pleas, then guilt-laced accusations, then outright threats. Every 15 minutes through the night, my voicemail filled with his voice echoing across the Pacific. "Dad, this isn't you. You're letting anger control you. Then we'll figure this out when we're back, but you better have money ready for us. And finally, you'll regret this. Old man." I listened carefully, then reached for my notepad. Each call was a gift. I wrote down the time, the date, and the exact wording. My handwriting wasn't as neat as Martha's had been, but it was legible enough for what mattered: proof. Proof that my son wasn't just careless, but manipulative. Proof that his betrayal had matured into coercion. That morning, I drove into downtown Oakland with a stack of papers under my arm: the vacation invoices, the hotel cancellation receipt, the bank transfers, and now pages of Simon's angry words. I pulled into the garage of a glass office tower and took the elevator up to the 15th floor. Bruce Harlan's office smelled of leather and polished wood, the kind of space where problems got solved permanently. Bruce rose from behind his desk when I walked in. "Lee," he said warmly, extending his hand. "It's been too long. What brings you in today?" I spread the papers across his desk, like evidence in a trial. "My son has shown me exactly who he is. I need protection." He adjusted his glasses and leaned over the documents, his expression sharpening as he read. "So he excluded you from a family vacation you paid for, then threatened you when you retaliated." "Not just excluded," I said quietly. "Erased me. Replaced me with my late wife's name on the booking. And now he calls me at all hours, demanding money, threatening consequences." Bruce tapped one of the voicemail transcripts I'd written out. "You'll regret this, old man." "That's not just disrespectful. That borders on financial coercion." I nodded. "I want him out of my will. Completely. I don't care if it means turning my estate over to charities. I won't let him benefit from betraying me." Bruce leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "That can be done, Lee. California law allows us to exclude him explicitly, and we'll bolster it with a video recording of your competency at signing. If he tries to contest it, we'll crush him in court." For the first time since that day at the airport, my shoulders eased. The weight of helplessness began to lift, replaced with a sense of direction. Bruce slid a legal pad toward me. "Write down every threat, every insult, every dollar you've given him. We'll draft documents so airtight he'll choke on them if he tries to breathe wrong in probate court." I picked up the pen, my hand steadier than it had been in weeks. Simon thought he could manipulate me forever. He had no idea I was already building the case that would undo him completely. By the end of that week, the tone of Simon's messages had shifted entirely. The frantic calls from the hotel lobby were gone. Now the voicemails carried a simmering rage sharpened by exhaustion. "Dad, you think you've won something here, but you haven't. You're just proving you're weak. When we get back, I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of man you really are." I played that one twice, letting his words sink in. Weak. It almost made me laugh. I had worked 43 years as an engineer, supporting his education, paying his bills, saving this family time and again. And now the son I raised thought humiliating me at an airport made him strong. He didn't realize the strength it took to endure betrayal without collapsing. He didn't realize the strength it took to prepare calmly for justice. Another message came the next morning. His voice cracked, fueled by fury more than panic now. "You think you can manipulate us with money? When we're back in California, you'll regret this." Old man. That phrase again. Old man. He spit it out like an insult, as if age erased dignity, as if years of sacrifice meant nothing. I wrote it down in my notepad, my pen pressing hard into the page. Each insult, each threat was a brick in the wall I was building against him. Bruce called me later that afternoon. "Lee, I've reviewed your notes. We have a solid case for disinheritance. Once you sign, Simon won't be able to touch a dime." His voice was steady, the kind of voice that had seen dozens of greedy families torn apart in court. "But you should be prepared. He may escalate further when he realizes what's happening." Prepared. The word fit me like armor. I'd lived my life planning for contingencies, budget overruns, faulty designs, impossible deadlines. Simon's tantrums were nothing compared to the boardrooms I'd survived. That night I sat by the window and let my mind replay every sacrifice. The mortgage payments, the tuition, the countless emergencies that had drained my savings and my patience. I thought of Martha's voice, soft but firm, reminding me that kindness should never be confused with weakness. She had been right. My kindness had turned into a leash, and Simon had grown comfortable yanking it. The leash was cut now. I looked at my phone, buzzing again on the side table. I didn't answer. Instead, I turned it off completely and let the silence settle around me. Outside, a hummingbird hovered at Martha's feeder, its wings a blur of determination. It reminded me that even the smallest creature survives with focus and persistence. Simon thought this was still a game he could win by shouting louder, by bullying harder. He didn't understand that the rules had already changed. He wasn't the one writing the script anymore. I was. And when the curtain finally fell, he'd realized that every word he'd spoken in anger had built the case that would destroy his claims forever. The following Monday, I found myself back in Bruce Harlan's office this time, with a leather portfolio under my arm. Inside were neatly organized documents, bank statements, receipts, the resort cancellation, and page after page of Simon's threats. Evidence. Proof that what I was about to do wasn't rash or vengeful, it was measured, justified, and permanent. Bruce motioned me to sit. "Lee, I've prepared draft documents for your review. Once we sign, Simon will have no claim over your estate." I settled into the chair, my hands steady. "Good. I want him excluded entirely. Not a cent. Not a house, not a car, not a savings bond. Everything goes elsewhere." Bruce opened the draft and began reading aloud, the testator, Lee Willis, being of sound mind and clear judgment. Hereby excludes his son Simon Willis from all inheritance due to demonstrated financial exploitation and threatening behavior. Hearing it stated aloud sent a ripple through me. These weren't just private notes in a drawer anymore. This was law. This was history being rewritten, not in Simon's favor, but in mine. Bruce continued outlining the new beneficiaries: a scholarship fund for engineering students at UC Berkeley, a sizable endowment for the Oakland Children's Education Foundation, funding for senior services and veterans programs. As he spoke, I could see Martha's smile in my mind, her approval as clear as if she were sitting beside me. Lee, Bruce said gently, "I have to ask one more time, are you certain? Once signed, there's no undoing this without another formal process. It will be final." I leaned forward, my eyes steady on his. Simon made his choice at that airport when he told me to go home. I'm simply making mine now. Bruce nodded, then flagged sections of the documents with yellow tabs. We'll need witnesses and a notary present when you sign. I recommend video recording the entire process. It ensures the will cannot be contested on grounds of competency. Do it, I said. The cleaner this is, the better. For the next hour, we went line by line refining details. I insisted on leaving a small trust for my grandchildren, not in Simon's control, but administered by the Scholarship Foundation, until they came of age. They deserved something, even if their father did not. Bruce approved the structure, making notes in his precise, lawyerly handwriting. When everything was set, he leaned back and said, "Lee, you're handling this with remarkable clarity. Most men in your position would lash out emotionally. You're approaching it with discipline." I gave a small smile. That's what Simon never understood. Silence doesn't mean weakness. It means planning. As I walked out of Bruce's office with the draft will in hand, the streets of San Francisco bustled with their usual noise: tourists, streetcars, businessmen on phones. Life was moving forward, and so was I. Simon thought he had erased me with a plane ticket. What he didn't realize was that I had just erased him from something far greater. When Simon and his family finally returned from Hawaii, the first thing I noticed was the silence. No warm greetings, no children rushing into my arms. Fern's eyes were cold, her smile brittle as porcelain. Simon didn't even attempt politeness. He walked into my house like it was a courtroom, already rehearsing his defense. "Dad," he started, pacing in front of the fireplace, "what you did was cruel. You left us stranded. Do you have any idea what that did to the kids?" I kept my seat in Martha's old chair, hands folded over my knee. "Do you have any idea what it did to me when you told me to go home at the airport? When you erased me from the vacation I paid for?" Fern jumped in before Simon could answer. "That was a misunderstanding. You're twisting it into something it wasn't. You've been under a lot of stress, Lee. Maybe you're not thinking as clearly as you used to." There it was, the first counterattack. Paint me as unstable. Suggest that age had clouded my judgment. It was a clever move, but not clever enough. "I'm thinking clearly enough," I said. "Clear enough to know that a father doesn't get forgotten from a reservation. Clear enough to know you replaced my name with Martha's." Simon's face tightened. "That's not true. You're making up stories now. Maybe the airline made an error." I leaned forward and slid a copy of the reservation across the coffee table. His eyes flicked over the names, landing on Martha's, and for the first time he faltered. Fern snatched the paper quickly, her lips tightening. "You're digging through old paperwork to make us look bad," she said sharply. "That's manipulative, Lee. You've always tried to control this family with money." Control. The word stung because it was the opposite of the truth. I had given freely for decades, never asking for repayment. They had mistaken generosity for control, kindness for weakness. And now, when faced with their own lies, they tried to flip the narrative. I sat back, letting their accusations hang in the air. I'm not the one who controlled this family with money. I'm the one who provided it. You two decided that came without respect. Fern crossed her arms. You're not well, Lee. Maybe it's time we talk about guardianship. Someone needs to protect you from making rash decisions. That sentence hit me like a slap, but not because I believed it. No, it was because it confirmed exactly what I'd suspected. This was never just about a vacation. This was about power, about control over the rest of my estate, over every dollar I had saved. Simon leaned closer, lowering his voice. You can make this easy or hard, Dad. Just undo whatever nonsense you're cooking up with lawyers, or we'll take this further." I didn't flinch. Instead, I made a note in my mind of every word he said. Let them build their case of manipulation and instability. I had my own case far stronger waiting in Bruce's office. The very next week, I began to notice the subtle changes. Friends from church who usually stopped by for coffee suddenly grew distant. A neighbor I'd known for 30 years crossed the street instead of waving. At first, I thought I was imagining it, but the pattern was too consistent. Whispers had started, and I knew exactly where they came from. One afternoon, Mrs. Alvarez from next door came over hesitantly. She set down a plate of cookies on my porch and said, "Lee, I don't know what to believe. Simon told us you canceled their family vacation out of spite. He said you've been struggling since Martha passed." Her voice trailed off, her eyes full of pity. Struggling. There it was again, the narrative they were planting. That I was unstable, bitter, not in my right mind. I thanked her politely, but when I closed the door, my hands shook. Not from fear, but from fury. They weren't content with betraying me privately. They wanted to tarnish my reputation publicly. A few days later, my sister Pearl called. "Lee, I'm hearing things. Simon says you've been erratic, that you lashed out in Hawaii for no reason. People are worried about you." I could hear Saul murmuring in the background, feeding her lines. I closed my eyes, steadying my breath. "Pearl, did Simon also tell you he left me at the airport after taking $20,000 from me?" Silence. Then a nervous laugh. "He said there was a mix-up." Mix-up. Always the same word, as if repetition could turn lies into truth. But what stung most was the silence of those who should have known better. Family dinners stopped. The grandchildren weren't brought around anymore. Every absence felt like another wedge being driven between me and the life I had built. It was a strategy, plain and simple: isolate me, make me look unbalanced, and set the stage for them to argue I was unfit to manage my own affairs. I sat in my office one evening, the pile of evidence growing taller by the day. Airline confirmations, bank transfers, voicemail transcripts. Their lies might work on neighbors and extended family, but in court only the truth mattered. Bruce's voice echoed in my head from our last meeting. "We'll need documentation of everything. If they try to smear you, we'll bury them in facts." So I doubled down. I started keeping a daily journal recording every interaction, every word exchanged. If Simon or Fern tried to paint me as unstable, I'd show a record of calm, rational steps taken in response to calculated cruelty. Still late at night, when the house was quiet and Martha's absence pressed heavily on me, I couldn't help but feel the loneliness. That was their tactic after all, to make me feel isolated enough to give in. But they had miscalculated. Loneliness doesn't break a man who has already buried the love of his life. It forges him into something harder. Let them whisper. Let them slander. They were building their case in gossip. I was building mine in truth. And when the time came, the contrast would destroy them. It didn't take long before the whispers turned into direct confrontation. One evening, Simon showed up at my door, unannounced, Fern right behind him, with her arms crossed like a shield. They didn't come for reconciliation. Their faces carried the smug certainty of people who thought they had the upper hand. Simon didn't waste time. "Dad, let's cut to the chase. We know you've been talking to lawyers. If you're planning to change your will, you need to stop now." I stayed seated in Martha's old chair, refusing to give them the satisfaction of standing. And why's that? Fern's voice was sharper than his. "Because if you go through with this, we'll challenge you in court. We'll claim you're not of sound mind. Everyone already knows you've been unstable since Martha died. Do you really want that dragged into the open?" The cruelty of it made my jaw tighten. They had taken my money, erased me from a vacation, slandered me to neighbors, and now they were weaponizing my grief. Martha had been gone for 3 years, but they wanted to twist my love for her into proof of madness. Simon leaned in, his eyes cold. You've always used money to control this family. Well, that ends now. If you don't cooperate, we'll make sure you lose control of everything: your house, your accounts, even your decisions. Don't forget, guardianship courts side with the younger generation more often than not. Guardianship. The word sent a chill down my spine, but I didn't let it show. They weren't just after inheritance, they wanted to seize control while I was still alive. I took a slow breath and looked Simon dead in the eye. You can try, but you'll fail. Fern scoffed. You think your little notes and receipts will hold up against the testimony of family? We'll line up everyone, Pearl, Saul, the neighbors, and they'll all say the same thing: you've lost touch with reality. Their arrogance might have intimidated another man, but I had come prepared. I reached into the folder beside me and pulled out a sheet of paper, sliding it across the coffee table. Simon frowned as he read the heading, Certified Transcription of Voicemail Messages. Below it were his exact words, dated and timed. You'll regret this, old man. His face paled. Fern snatched the paper, scanning it quickly before tossing it back onto the table. That proves nothing. It's your word against ours. Not for long, I said calmly. My lawyer has copies of the actual recordings, digital files, hard evidence. Courts don't care about gossip, they care about proof. And I have plenty. For a moment, silence filled the room. Then Simon muttered, You're making a mistake, Dad. One you can't undo. I leaned back, unshaken. No, son. The mistake was thinking I'd let you keep doing this. They left in a storm of anger, slamming the door behind them. I sat alone in the quiet afterward, my pulse steady. Their threats didn't scare me. If anything, they confirmed I was on the right path. They had drawn their battle lines, but so had I, and mine were written in law, not lies. After Simon and Fern stormed out, the house settled back into silence, but my mind refused to rest. Their threats about guardianship still echoed, and though I knew Bruce would shred such claims in court, I also knew preparation was my best defense. If Simon wanted to accuse me of being irrational, I would show the opposite: deliberate, documented clarity. I went to my filing cabinet, the one Martha had insisted we buy back when I first retired. Each drawer was labeled in her careful handwriting: education, mortgage, medical, family support. Over the years, I had slipped receipts and statements into those folders more out of habit than foresight. Now they became ammunition. The first folder held tuition checks from 25 years ago, each one signed by my hand when Simon couldn't cover his college costs. I had thought of it as an investment in his future. Instead, it had been the beginning of a pattern. The mortgage folder revealed bank transfers month after month covering his payments during layoffs he never told Fern were his fault. Medical contained hospital bills from Fern's surgery stamped paid in red ink. I had quietly taken care of them, while Simon told everyone insurance handled it. By the time I stacked everything on my desk, the evidence towered like a paper monument to decades of sacrifice. I totaled the numbers in the margins. $47,000 last year alone. Nearly $500,000 over the span of 2 decades. It wasn't just generosity anymore, it was dependency, cultivated and exploited. I imagined Simon sneering, "You've always controlled us with money." No, I thought bitterly. If anyone had been controlled, it was me. Controlled by guilt, by duty, by love, twisted into obligation. I had let it happen because I wanted to believe the best in him. Martha used to warn me, don't confuse helping with enabling Lee. One lifts someone up, the other teaches them to lean forever. She had been right. I placed the receipts into neat piles and clipped them together. Then I called Bruce. When he picked up, his voice carried the calm confidence I needed. "Lee, how are you holding up? I've got something for you," I said. "Documentation going back 20 years. Every dollar I gave Simon, every bill I covered. It's all there." He was silent for a beat, then let out a low whistle. "That's more than enough." Combined with his threats, this isn't just grounds for disinheritance. It paints a clear picture of financial exploitation. Judges don't take that lightly. "Good," I said. "I don't want them to think this is just about a canceled vacation. This is about a lifetime of taking." That night I sat at my desk long after the sun went down, staring at the stacks of paper. They weren't just numbers. They were years of my life, years I could never reclaim. But now they would serve a different purpose. They would speak for me in the cold clarity of a courtroom, stripping Simon's lies bare. For the first time, I felt something close to peace. They had tried to bury me under slander. Instead, I had unearthed the truth. And the truth was heavier than all their gossip combined. The following week, I walked into Bruce Harlan's office with 2 heavy boxes of files. My arms ached carrying them, but there was a certain satisfaction in the weight. It wasn't just paper. It was decades of history, every tuition check, every mortgage transfer, every emergency I had quietly covered. Evidence Simon could never deny. Bruce raised his eyebrows as I set the boxes down on his conference table. "Lee, this is thorough. I want no room for him to twist the truth," I said. "They're already whispering about guardianship, saying I'm unstable. I want a record that shows the opposite, methodical, rational, prepared." He opened a folder, skimming the contents. "This is more than enough. With these records plus his voicemails, we can frame a clear case of financial exploitation and coercion. If he contests the will, he'll be the one exposed." I sat back in the chair, watching Bruce's calm precision as he sorted through the evidence. I thought of Simon's smug words in my living room. "We'll make sure everyone knows what kind of man you really are." Well, this was exactly what kind of man I was. One who planned, documented, and refused to be erased. Bruce looked up. "Lee, are you prepared for the fallout? Once the new will is signed and Simon learns he's excluded, he won't go quietly. He'll try every angle, emotional manipulation, legal challenges, maybe even more public slander." I nodded slowly. "I know. But the damage is already done. They've taken my generosity and turned it into a weapon against me. This isn't just about protecting money. It's about protecting my dignity." He leaned forward, his tone firm. "Then here's what I recommend we finalize the will this week with witnesses and a notary present. We'll video record the signing to establish competency. That way, no court can claim you were pressured or confused. Once it's executed, your estate will be locked tight. Simon won't have a legal leg to stand on." For the first time in years, I felt the weight of fear lift off my shoulders. "Do it," I said. "I want it ironclad. No loopholes, no cracks for him to crawl through." Bruce smiled faintly. "I'll prepare everything. When the time comes, you'll be holding the cards, not him." As I left his office and stepped into the cool air of San Francisco's financial district, I paused to take in the sight of the Bay Bridge glinting in the afternoon sun. The city pulsed with its usual rhythm, people rushing to meetings, streetcars clattering, tourists snapping pictures. But for me, everything felt different. I was no longer the man humiliated at an airport. I was no longer the father too kind to say no. I was the man preparing the final strike. And when it landed, Simon would finally understand that betrayal doesn't erase a father's strength, it awakens it. 3 weeks passed with a kind of quiet I hadn't known in years. Each morning, I rose early, brewed my coffee, and sat by the window as the sun lifted over the Oakland hills. No frantic calls demanding money. No unannounced visits with new emergencies. Just silence, a silence I had earned. But beneath that calm, I was preparing for the moment that would define everything. Bruce called on a Thursday morning. "Lee Flight 441 from Honolulu lands at SFO next week Thursday afternoon. If you're ready, we'll meet them there." His tone carried both reassurance and warning. This wasn't just paperwork anymore. This was confrontation. "I'll be there," I said without hesitation. The days leading up to their arrival, I rehearsed what I would say. Not long speeches, just clear, measured words. Simon thrived on chaos and shouting. I wouldn't give him that satisfaction. Instead, I would stand calmly, documents in hand, and let the truth do the work. At night, I took out Martha's picture from the mantel and placed it on the desk beside the sealed envelope Bruce had given me, a certified copy of the new will. Her eyes in that photo were steady, full of quiet strength. "You'd want this," I whispered. "Not revenge, but justice." On the morning of their arrival, I dressed deliberately. A pressed shirt, my best jacket, polished shoes. Not because I wanted to impress anyone, but because I wanted no one to mistake me for a confused old man. I was going to look exactly like what I was, a man in command of his choices. Bruce picked me up at noon. He looked sharp in a dark suit, his leather portfolio tucked under one arm. "Ready?" he asked, as I climbed into the passenger seat. "More than ready," I replied. The drive across the Bay Bridge felt strangely symbolic. 3 weeks earlier, I had crossed it in defeat, dragging my suitcase home from the airport after Simon discarded me. Now I crossed it with a lawyer at my side, carrying documents that would rewrite the legacy Simon thought was his by right. At SFO, we took our place near the International Arrivals Terminal. Travelers streamed past, families with leis around their necks, business people tugging briefcases, children still humming with excitement from their vacations. I stood tall among them, the envelope tucked securely under my arm. Bruce checked his watch. "Flight 441 just landed. They'll be through customs in about 20 minutes. I felt my heartbeat steady, not race. This wasn't a moment for anger or drama. It was a moment for clarity. For 3 weeks, Simon had imagined he still had the upper hand, that his threats would scare me into silence. In just a few minutes, he would see the truth. I wasn't his victim. I was his reckoning. As the sliding doors began to open and passengers spilled into the terminal, I adjusted my jacket and tightened my grip on the envelope. The confrontation I had been preparing for was finally here. The terminal doors slid open, and streams of passengers began pouring out. Most looked weary but cheerful, their arms full of duty-free bags, their necks draped in flower leis. I scanned each face, steadying myself for the storm I knew was coming. Then I saw them, Pearl chatting animatedly, Saul pushing a cart stacked with suitcases, Fern holding Mia's hand, Ethan trailing close behind. And finally, Simon lingering at the rear, scrolling on his phone, as if the whole world were still his to control. Mia's eyes caught mine first. She let out a squeal of delight and dropped her ukulele to the floor as she sprinted toward me. Grandpa Ethan followed his lei, bouncing against his chest, his small face lighting up in a way that made my heart ache. I bent down, arms wide, and they collided into me with hugs so fierce they nearly knocked me off balance. "I missed you so much," Mia whispered. Ethan chimed in, "Wait till you hear about the dolphins, Grandpa, their innocence, their genuine joy cut through the bitterness like sunlight breaking storm clouds." For a brief moment, I almost forgot the reason I was here. Then I looked up and saw Simon's face. His step faltered, his eyes narrowing as if he'd seen a ghost. The relaxed vacation swagger drained from him in an instant. He wasn't ready for this. He had expected silence retreat. Instead, I stood here with his children clinging to me, their love undeniable. Fern reached his side, her smile freezing when she spotted Bruce standing tall in his suit portfolio in hand. Saul slowed his pace, his accountant's eyes already calculating that something serious was about to unfold. Pearl, ever oblivious, kept chattering about the luau buffet until Saul touched her elbow to quiet her. I straightened gently, resting a hand on Mia's shoulder. "How was your vacation?" asked, my tone calm, almost casual. Simon's jaw tightened. "Dad, what are you doing here?" "Welcoming you home," I said evenly. My other hand brushed the envelope tucked beneath my arm, a deliberate gesture. His eyes followed it, and a flicker of unease broke through his mask. Bruce stepped forward with quiet authority. "Mr. Simon Willis," he said, his voice carrying over the hum of the terminal. "On behalf of your father, I am delivering a certified copy of his revised last will and testament executed May 25th of this year." He extended the sealed envelope toward Simon. Simon's hands trembled as he accepted it, the color draining from his face. Around us, other travelers slowed their pace, sensing drama unfolding. Fern leaned in, whispering urgently, but her eyes betrayed alarm. I held my grandchildren close, my voice steady, as I looked Simon in the eye. "You told me to go home, son. Today I've come to tell you exactly where home and legacy truly belong." Simon tore the envelope open with jerky hands, his movements clumsy, betraying the panic beneath his anger. The terminal noise seemed to dull as he unfolded the pages and began to read. His eyes darted across the legal language, his tan from Hawaiian sun paling with every line. This can't be real," he muttered. Fern leaned over his shoulder, scanning quickly, her face draining of color. "Lee, surely this is a mistake," she said, her voice strained. "Think of the children. They're your grandchildren." "I did think of them," I answered calmly. "That's why I paid $20,000 for their vacation. That's why I set up scholarship funds in their honor, instead of leaving them to a man who would use them as pawns." Simon's head snapped up, his eyes blazing. "You can't do this to us. I'm your son." "Yes," I said quietly, "the son who told me to go home after taking my money. The son who replaced me with his dead mother's name on a reservation. The son who threatened me when I finally stood up for myself. That son no longer has a claim here." A murmur rippled through the bystanders. Travelers slowed their steps, some openly watching, others pretending to fuss with luggage while their ears strained toward us. Simon's voice rose sharp enough to turn heads. "This is impossible. You can't disinherit family." "There are laws." Bruce stepped forward smoothly, his tone measured but firm. "Actually, Mr. Willis, under California probate law, your father is well within his rights to distribute his estate as he sees fit. The will is airtight. Competency was verified by video recording during the signing." Simon's hands shook as he tried to smooth the crumpled papers. His voice cracked between fury and desperation. "I'll contest this. I'll drag it through the courts until it bleeds." I said, my tone steady. "Every voicemail you left, every threat, every insult, you'll regret this old man, will be played in open court. You won't just lose. You'll be exposed." Fern touched his arm, trying to steady him. "Simon not here," she whispered, but her eyes darted to the crowd gathering, realizing the humiliation was already public. Pearl finally stopped her chatter, her face bewildered. "Lee, what's going on? Why does everyone look so upset?" Saul, more perceptive, sighed deeply. "Pearl, I think it's best we step aside. This is serious." But Simon couldn't stop. His voice grew louder, angrier. You're throwing away family over one stupid argument. My heart ached, but my resolve didn't waver. It wasn't an argument, Simon. It was betrayal. And betrayal has consequences. Mia tugged at my sleeve, her small voice rising over her father's shouting. Grandpa, why is Daddy yelling? I bent down, meeting her eyes. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes that cost them things they thought they'd always have. But you, my dear, will always have my love. As I straightened, I saw Simon's fury boil into something darker, but he was powerless. The documents in his hands were stronger than his rage. For the first time, the balance of power had shifted, and he knew it. Simon's hands shook as he clutched the will, his face reddening, his voice growing louder. This won't stand. You think some stack of papers can erase me? I'll hire lawyers, Dad. I'll take this to court, and when I'm done, everyone will see how you were manipulated. You're old. You're grieving, you're not thinking clearly. Judges will laugh this out of the room. Bruce stepped forward, unflinching. His voice was even professional, the kind that silences a room. Mr. Willis, your father's competency was documented on video by 2 independent witnesses and a notary public. The signing was conducted in full compliance with California probate law. This will is not just enforceable, it is ironclad. Simon's fury flickered to uncertainty for just a moment. Fern tried to recover the ground. Lee, please, she said, her tone sliding into faux concern. We don't want to fight you. Think of the grandchildren. Don't let lawyers twist this family apart. Just reconsider quietly before this gets ugly. I shook my head, my voice calm but resolute. Ugly started when Simon told me to go home at the airport. Ugly continued when you both spread lies that I was unstable. You made your choices. I've made mine. Simon slammed the crumpled papers onto his suitcase, drawing the attention of more passers-by. So that's it. You just erase me after everything I've done for this family. The words nearly made me laugh. I raised my voice just enough for those around us to hear. Everything you've done, Simon. I have 20 years of bank records showing what I've done for you, your tuition, your mortgage, your emergencies, your children's needs. That wasn't your sacrifice. It was mine. And how did you repay it? With betrayal. Gasps rippled from onlookers. A woman tugging her child's hand muttered shameful under her breath as she passed. Bruce placed a business card on top of the will, his gesture deliberate. Mr. Willis, if you intend to pursue litigation, my firm is prepared. But I'll warn you, frivolous suits can be costly. You may find yourself facing financial consequences far worse than what's outlined in those documents. Simon froze, his bluster colliding with reality. He looked at Fern, who shifted uneasily, her eyes darting to Saul. The old accountant finally spoke, his tone low but firm. Simon, you should think carefully. This is a battle you can't win. For a moment, Simon looked like a cornered animal torn between lashing out and collapsing under the truth. His fists clenched, but his voice cracked instead of roared. You'll regret this, Dad. Mark my words, you'll regret it. I met his glare steadily. No, Simon. The regret is yours, and you'll carry it every time you remember that you lost everything not because of me, but because of your own choices. Silence stretched heavy and final. Around us, the airport noise resumed, luggage wheels rolling, announcements echoing, life moving on, while Simon stood still, holding the ruins of his entitlement in shaking hands. The moment hung in the air like the final note of a song. Simon stood there, fists clenched, his face blotched red, Fern whispering frantically at his side. Pearl confused, and Saul watching in grim silence. My grandchildren, still clutching my arms, looked up at me with wide eyes. Around us, travelers paused, curious witnesses to a family reckoning that no one could mistake for anything but what it was, a son undone by his own greed. Bruce closed his portfolio with deliberate calm. "Our business here is concluded," he said. His words cut through the tension like a gavel striking wood. He turned toward the exit, and I followed, keeping my steps measured, my back straight. Dad Simon's voice cracked behind me, louder now, desperate to reclaim some shred of authority. "This isn't over. You can't just walk away." I didn't turn. "It's already over," I said, my voice carrying across the terminal without rising. "You ended it the moment you betrayed me." The sound of his shouting grew fainter as Bruce and I moved down the corridor. The sliding doors ahead parted, letting in the cool bay breeze. Each step felt like shedding a weight I had carried for decades. Simon's voice had always been in my ear, pleading, demanding, blaming. Now finally, it was nothing but background noise, drowned out by the steady rhythm of my own resolve. Outside, Bruce glanced at me, his expression unreadable but approving. "That went exactly as planned," he said. "Better," I replied. "He showed everyone his true character. No court will question this will after today." We walked together to the garage, the clatter of luggage wheels and reunion cheers fading behind us. For 3 weeks, Simon had believed he still controlled the story, that his threats could frighten me into silence. Today, in front of his family and strangers alike, the story had been rewritten. And for once, I was the one holding the pen. As Bruce drove me back across the Bay Bridge, I stared out at the water glittering in the late afternoon light. Martha would have loved this view. She would have told me I did the right thing, clean, legal, proportional. Not revenge, but justice. The kind that doesn't just punish, but teaches. When we pulled into my driveway, the porch light flicked on, automatically welcoming me home. I shook Bruce's hand, thanking him not just for his legal skill, but for standing beside me in this fight. He nodded, firm and steady. "You did the hard part, Lee. You stood your ground." Inside, the house was quiet, but it no longer felt empty. It felt earned. I fixed myself a simple dinner, scrambled eggs and toast, poured a cup of tea, and sat by the window in Martha's chair. Across the mantel, the photographs of family still smiled back, but their meaning had changed. They were reminders of what I gave, not what I lost. And as night fell over Oakland, I realized something profound. I hadn't just disinherited my son. I had reclaimed my dignity. Looking back now, I realized the betrayal at that airport was both the cruelest wound and the greatest gift. It forced me to see the truth I had avoided for too long, that kindness without boundaries becomes weakness, and sacrifice without respect becomes exploitation. For decades, I had enabled Simon, believing that one more loan, one more gift, one more chance would change him. Instead, it only taught him to take more. By choosing justice instead of silence, I reclaimed something no amount of money could buy: my dignity. I redirected my life's work to causes that will outlast me, to children and communities that will be grateful rather than entitled. And I did it without shouting, without fists, without revenge. I did it with proof, with law, with quiet resolve. To any parent listening who feels taken for granted, I want you to remember this: love should never mean erasing yourself. Sometimes the strongest love is drawing a line and teaching that actions have consequences. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever faced betrayal from someone you trusted most? How did you handle it? And what did you learn? Share your story in the comments. I promise your words may help someone else find their strength. If this story meant something to you, please like, subscribe, and share. Dignity is not lost, it is reclaimed. Thank you for listening.